And Nigeria needs a new presidential jet. The controversies over the proposed purchase of a new presidential jet following the problems encountered by the airplane on separate trips to Saudi Arabia, the Netherlands and South Africa is yet to fizzle out in the media space of Nigeria. The decision to purchase the aircraft has recently led to a national debate, with some Nigerians saying it's the wrong time to think of making any investment in a new presidential jet. But many people have also argued that the pros outweigh the cons for not purchasing the aircraft. However, the House of Representatives Committee on National Security and Intelligence had recently asked the federal government to purchase 2 new aircrafts for President Bola Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima. And Arise News can authoritatively confirm that aside from the fact that the presidential jet of any nation remains in some way the country's projection of its national brand to other nations, for leaders of all modern democracies, a good presidential fleet also serves as a boost for robust international engagement. Now, Vimbai, Rufai, absolutely, as I just read there, this has been the source of a lot of debate, not only in our newsroom, but indeed across the country. On the one hand, you've had a lot of people say that perhaps this isn't the right time. This might not be the most efficient deployment of resources at this time because we are countering a cost of living crisis across the country. Insecurity remains an issue. Just yesterday, we were talking about the attacks in Borno, and I can imagine there are many people who feel as though these monies could be spent in other areas. However, as we've just read in our introduction there's also a viable argument that the president's and his presidential fleet should be an area where Nigeria's brand can be presented well, and also take a look at the fact that to some extent, we can appreciate that this is also a move towards making sure Nigeria's security at this level remains intact. But it is somewhat of a step aside from the debates that we've been having on the show, but Arise News, along with our sister publication This Day, has spoken in one unified voice in support of this purchase. What are your thoughts?
So for me, there are various parts of the debate, and I'd like to advance both parts of the debate, for clarity. Number one, what are the facts on ground? The facts on ground, based on the assessment of the team that manages the presidential fleet, says it's moribund, it's unserviceable. It was bought last during Obasanjo's regime, and we need to have a rejig. They cited a couple of mishaps. The vice president couldn't fly. The president stranded as a result of all of that. In fact, steps have been made to ameliorate this. How? Some of the planes initially on that fleet, I think they've contracted an American company to sort of like evaluate how sale is going to be done. The Senate president did say that nobody will tell him otherwise, that he has to ensure that the president is safe. So if he's brought in a supplementary budget, it will be looked at and all of that. So some have said, okay, it's the best viable option to be able to see if you can offload the ones on ground and also look for a proper funding pattern, to be able to fund it so that you do not impinge upon the budget and all of that. But when you also look at it, you want safety and security.
Sure.
Some have also cited the fact that it's just good optics, for us to be able to have a presidential jet at this time. But the other part of the argument is this. At a time where things are at an all-time low, let me give you the numbers quickly. As at 2015, when President Goodluck Jonathan left, the debt to GDP ratio was about 20.3%. As at when President Muhammadu Buhari was leaving, it was about 38, 39%, going into 40%. Today, the debt to GDP ratio is 52%. One of the highest in over 10 years. In fact, the last time we had a debt to GDP ratio higher in the last 30 years was 1990, where we have debt to GDP ratio topping over 70%, and the late 1999 to the early 2000, when Olusegun Obasanjo took up, and the debt to GDP ratio was over 63%, and we all know how that went. Olusegun Obasanjo fought for debt relief from the Paris Club. Finally, we got it. It came down to about 8-9%. But now we've budgeted up to over 50% as we speak. The ECOWAS benchmark is 70%. We shouldn't be operating by the ECOWAS. Nigerians have always been known to have low debts. The what's it called benchmark? The World Bank benchmark is about 55%. We're already 52%. Cost of living is an all-time high. Between last year and this year, inflation rate when President Tinubu got in was about 22%, 20.22%. Today is 33%. 8.9%. We've added well over 11% to the inflation threshold. Cost of living has quadrupled. It's at an all-time high. Nigeria's revenue, too, is also slumping. Revenue collection agencies keep complaining that we're not collecting enough revenue to be able to back up the deficit we're collecting. Some of the things that are boosting our debt now is because we're incurring more deficit to be able to fund the budget.
Right.
So when you look at all of this, those that argue are saying, look at the numbers. This is the best time. We're talking about the coastal road. We're talking about other projects here and there. The coastal road alone is going to cost 15 trillion. Also, when you look at all the pending roads left undone in this country, it will cost about 15 trillion to complete all the roads. Mm-hmm. We just recently completed a 21 billion vice presidential lodge. We spent 90 billion on Hajj. So when you juxtapose it with all the spendings, so that's the argument against. Mm-hmm. But some people are arguing for and say, oh, it should say we want the safety and security of the president. So I've just been able to present both arguments to a lot of Nigerians.
Indeed.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I'd like to begin by also stating that the Eagle One is a Boeing 737 business jet, which has a lifespan of about 90,000 flying hours, or approximately 20 to 25 years. So if you look at the purchase date, which I believe was under President Obasanjo in the early 2000s, it has actually lived its lifespan as an aircraft. So we were due to buy a new aircraft. The point of contention, however, is the fact that where is our sense of planning? Where is our sense of, we were told that government is a continuum. So one would have expected that after 8 years of APC, within that 8 years, that administration would have acknowledged the fact that in the next few years, we're going to need to renew, repair, do whatever we need to do because our Eagle One is expiring. So it frustrates people. Because we now find ourselves, and I do pity the current administration because, so many things are falling on their lap, some not of their creation. However, unfortunately, heavy is the head that wears the crown. However, at the moment, this is what this administration needs to deal with, the fact that this aircraft has lived its life and it needs to be replaced. What are the options on the ground? It's said that Nigeria has one of the biggest presidential fleets in the world. Nigeria has debatably 10 to 12 aircraft in the presidential fleet. Why is that necessary? Why is it necessary to purchase separate aircrafts for the president and the vice president when we're living in a time when we should be exercising austerity measures? Isn't this a good time to dispose of the entire 10, 12 aircraft presidential fleet, buy one very good, brand new, robust presidential carrier and call it a day? I think Nigerians would celebrate that because we do understand the need for the safety and security of the president and the presidency. That's primary. It's very important. However, all of these things need to be put into consideration. When I went into the This Day report, I found it quite profound that there was a reference made to the vice president of Malawi who died in a tragic helicopter crash last month. However, in the same Malawi, in 2013, President Joyce Banda sold her presidential jet along with a number of vehicles in the presidential motorcade in the name of austerity measures. What it did is it made her a darling with the West, and the nations of the West came knocking at her door to want to assist Malawi with the crisis they had at the time. However, like Rufai pointed, every argument has two sides because unfortunately after President Joyce Banda sold the presidential aircraft, there was controversy about what the money was actually used for. So at the end of the day, what's required is transparency. What's required is innovative thinking. What's required is to also consider the fact that the masses are screaming Ebim power. I even know what Ebim power means now.
Exactly, don't we all?
You're laughing at me.
No, don't do that.
And that's not in Shona.
It's not in Shona. It's one of the few Yoruba phrases I know now.
Exactly that. Well, let's take another story. In a 6-3 split decision, the US Supreme Court has held that former President Donald Trump cannot be prosecuted for official actions taken as president, but lacks such immunity for unofficial acts. The justices in the landmark ruling recognized that for the first time, the former US presidents have been shielded from prosecution for actions they took within their constitutional authority, as opposed to a private capacity. The justices threw out a lower court's decision rejecting Trump's claim of immunity from criminal charges involving his efforts to undo his 2020 election loss to Joe Biden. The 6 conservative justices were in the majority. The Supreme Court 3 liberals dissented, as you can imagine. Now, the decision came in Trump's appeal of a lower court ruling rejecting his immunity claim. The court decided the blockbuster case on the last day of its term. Now, Trump had argued that he was immune from prosecution because he was serving as president when he took the actions that led to the charges. Now, Smith had opposed presidential immunity from prosecution based on the principle that no one is above the law. So, I mean, former President Donald Trump has had a fair few run-ins with the courts over the last couple of months. And if we're looking at this latest decision from the Supreme Court, I don't think it'll come as a surprise to many. It is obviously a court that leans towards the Republican because of the amount of justices who emit from that party. And essentially, I do think that this will be a win for Donald Trump and his supporters, him being able to secure immunity for official acts that were taken while he was president. I think that as it stands, I don't think that many people would see anything wrong with that. I think a presidential duty, somebody at the very helm of a country, is normally enshrined by immunity. However, when you're looking at the January 6th insurrection, that's when you take a closer look at immunity and whether or not it is a responsibility or a benefit or a privilege that should be extended to everyone in every case. If America builds itself and prides itself on being a beacon of democracy, which clearly it is not, because no one democracy is perfect, then it should be able to take a closer look at what happened on January 6th, the fact that it was a clear and direct threat towards democracy, and he should have, I'd imagine many Americans would agree that he should have or will be punished severely for those acts. That being said, I'm sure that he will take this as a win in the run-up to the Republic National Conventions coming up. It is definitely going to be a very interesting political season for the United States, as it always is. But what are your thoughts on him being able to secure immunity? Do you think this bolsters his campaign, or do you think this will ruffle a lot of feathers, not just in the Democratic sphere?
Let me mimic Trump for a bit. So I'm sure Trump will hear this. I told them I did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong on the 6th of January. Nothing wrong. I was right, big league. The Supreme Court proved me right.
The Supreme Court that he put justices on
proved me right. I was not wrong. But cut that. That's rubbish.
Right.
I fear for America. Is this the land of the Pilgrim's Pride?
Is it?
Is this America? This is America. A Childish Gambino says. This is America, where injustice now reigns supreme, where insurrection against the states is shielded under immunity. This is America. When pain and savagery continues under the cloak of democracy. This is America. This is America that has no respect for its own democracy, but wants to teach the rest of the world democracy. Well, this is America. The reason why the Supreme Court ruled that way is because Trump was smart enough to have packed the court with Republican conservative leading judges. Right. You think the likes of them, Amy Coney Barrett, will rule against Trump? You think the likes of them, Gorsuch, will rule against him? You think the rights of other people out there on the Supreme Court will rule against him? No. So if you can pack the court, you get the judgment at the highest level.
Right.
And this further bolstered what Trump says, I'll shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nothing will happen. He made that statement deliberately because Fifth Avenue in New York is a very center point to most blocks. So it's like the call center, we shoot somebody and nothing will happen. Let's call it spade a spade. What Trump committed was an insurrection against the state. His vice president was there. He committed an insurrection against a constitutionally recognized procedure in America to be able to validate the votes when that was going on because he wasn't winning. So he wanted to disrupt the system. Mm-hmm. And apart from that, he also ensured that the National Guard did not respond on time until most of the governors had to overrun him to bring about the National Guard to secure democracy. Right. He couldn't take the fact that he lost. And you don't want that. You don't want a big baby with democracy in the hands of leading democracy. So this is the same man that is going to have the biscuits in his hands, the nuclear weapon, where the emotions are unstable. Right. In fact, this is a day to cry about for America. And I am sad. He gets away with this. He's going to trump up his base. He's going to be very excited.
Right. I mean, that was the irony from the decision there.
But what happened? No, I've told you why the decision was made. Because it's packed the court with the judge that would definitely lead to
Absolutely,
him.
but when they said that, no one is above the law, but in the same breath saying that he has absolute immunity, which one makes sense?
So people have more absolute immunity over insurrection. Is that what it means now?
That's what it implies.
So insurrection, one of the greatest offense against the state, people have more absolute immunity over insurrection.
Right. Goodbye.
This is quite a conversation because I think for me what it proved is that there's no such thing as a perfect political system. Yes. We are all a work in progress. And unfortunately, no political system, as this proved, has been able to overcome human nature and what power does to people. I know that New York Congresswoman Cortez is trying to push for impeachment of some of the Supreme Court judges because, she feels that this is a case of corruption within the Supreme Court. At the end of the day, everything comes down to our trying to believe in the goodness in mankind, because I believe America had gotten to the point where they felt that the spirit of everything will always be done in a spirit of purity and goodness and so forth. However, this election, I believe we're going to see two super political strategists, because a lot of people are also not convinced about what Biden put out at the debate, because just the following day we saw how vibrant he was at the rally, and so everybody is saying that it seems that there may be a script that he's playing out to that tries to put him across as somewhat of the weaker man and tries to get him a bit of sympathy, but then pushes him across the finish line at the last moment. Well, we'll see about that. However, with Trump as well, you can tell that he has thought about every single obstacle, because this case is not going to go to court before elections. He's going to be a sitting president who's most likely going to be sitting in the dock if this case,
if he wins the election.
If he wins the election, yes. By all indices of what we've seen by this ruling. But again, just as Rufai has said, honestly just shows you that at the end of the day, all political systems are subject to the human spirit of those who are in charge of them. So it doesn't matter. We always say, oh, in Africa, we'll manipulate the courts, we'll do. It comes down to human nature, whether you're American, whether you're Nigerian, Zimbabwean, Polish, German. It's just about making sure that our political systems are in good hands. That's the lesson from this.
You're right. Politics is politics everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.